And a happy Saturday to everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. I am going solo today. It's summer break, so I'll be taking a break in 2 weeks as I drive my son up to college. And I think Brandon will be back next week. He's also on vacation, so we're trying to alternate. But in the meantime, the news doesn't stop. So we try to give you guys your update, answer your questions, and whenever someone's free, we try to bring them on. But today, I think I am flying solo. So if you have any questions, let me know. I may miss a question or two because, well, my eyes just aren't fast as they used to be. So yeah, I hope everyone's doing well this Saturday. Let me know if there's issues with audio. And well, there's no one else here to let me know other than you guys. So hope everyone's doing well. And let's see, I'll try to type and talk at the same time, see what happens. But a lot of good things happening this week. So we'll go over today's topics and then, well, we'll get into your questions because I know there were a lot of issues raised last week I want to address this week. And we'll start with the QN90A's lower resolution. So last week we talked about the U7G and how I noticed that, strangely enough, Samsung's QN90A this year has an issue. Well, they had it last year as well, but I thought it was an 8K thing. But it turns out it looks like it is a Samsung thing altogether, where in the most accurate movie mode, the resolution is not quite 4K. You lose a touch of contrast and you lose a touch of resolution. So we're talking about how we resolve that. And a lot of this is thanks to Bat Tech. Hey, Bat, you the man. We found a solution. It's not a great solution, but at least it helps address the resolution. So we'll talk about that. So for those of you who have Samsung TVs, it doesn't just affect the QN90A. I believe it affects all of them. But we'll see. If you guys have a different model, let me know if you see differences, right? And we'll also talk about the $1,000 65-inch gaming OLED. This is going to be cool. So it's the same OLED that LG Display is giving to everybody, right? Or selling, not really giving. But this tells me that we're going to start seeing affordable OLED TVs hitting the price points that we've all talked about. The minute OLED hits $1,000, that 65-inch size, that changes everything. Because my U7G, I just finished the review, and I'm calling it, what a great budget buy for $1,000. But here we have OLEDs releasing $1,000. Now, it doesn't mean the processing is great or anything like that, but it's got gaming features like G-Sync. The only OLED right now that has G-Sync compatibility is the LG. So we'll talk about that OLED. You may know which one it is already, but we'll talk about it. And of course, we're going to talk about the Samsung next-gen QD-OLED display / QD display. Many of you are wondering, wait a minute, is this QD-OLED different than the QNED that's coming up? And then how is QNED Samsung different than LG's QNED? Lots of confusion there. And lastly, we're going to talk about the Sony X95J or what? Meaning, what are your options at this price point? I know it's launching at $2,000, but how many of you believe that's going to stay at $2,000, right? It launches at $2,000. Realistically, the 65-inch X95J will likely end up around $1,700 Black Friday, and then by the end of the year into next year, it'll probably float around $1,600. That's my guess, right? That's assuming availability. The 65-inch, we're not even going to see it until probably late into September, but we'll see. We'll talk to Robert this week. And yes, speaking of Robert, we're going to have some comparisons with Robert at Value Electronics. He's going to have the Z9J, the QNED 99, the X95J, all 85 inches with the QN900A. So we're going to compare their 85-inch 4K flagships and their 85-inch 8K flagships to see, hey, does it make a difference? I don't know when he'll get the Hisense dual cell, but the minute he gets it, we're going to try to do some comparisons there and talk to him about that. So let's jump into it. Before we jump in, I'll check some questions real quick. We're going to talk about the lower resolution and how it's solved, right? So let's see. Before we jump in, let's see. Say hello to everyone that's there. Hey, Corey. Got your question here. So real quick, the LG QNED is just mini LED. It has nothing to do with Samsung's QNED. Samsung's QNED is actually a technical term. The QNED, the NED stands for Nano Rod LED, and that's using Nano Rod micro LED blue backlighting unit to light up the quantum dot display color converting layer. LG QNED just means they're using a quantum dot with mini LED, just like everybody else. And that's it. There's nothing special because QNED is not a trademarked term. So the trademark or IP courts have ruled in the USA that QNED does not belong to LG, nor does it belong to Samsung. It's descriptive. It's like saying, I don't know, a hot pot, right? It just doesn't mean anything anymore. So it's a lot of confusion, and LG is taking advantage of that confusion. So when you hear QNED from LG, it just means they have a mini LED, they've added quantum dots, but they're still using an IPS panel. So yeah. And of course, hello, Martin. This one we'll have to talk about once we get to Robert, because I cannot elaborate at this point. They do have an anti-glare layer. How good it is, we'll see. Robert will be able to compare it head-to-head with the Q90A, so we'll talk about that probably later in the week. And Hathwer, Crank, David, Van, hey guys. And we are going to jump into our big discussion, the Q90A lower resolution solved. So let's talk about last week. Last week, this was the image I showed where the U7G, better resolution, better contrast. The Q90A, it feels like if you look up close, you're not getting the detail. U8G and U7G has detail, right? The earring here, something is lost. And nothing I did would change that in movie mode. Calibrated day, calibrated night. Changing the dimming zones didn't help. Enhanced contrast did not help. However, Bad Tech did experiment further because he also has the Samsung. He says, wait a minute, it looks like if you go into standard mode, it looks better. The resolution is back. So I tried it, and well, Bad Tech, lo and behold. So this is the Q90A right here. And yes, right there, the resolution is back. Now, here's the problem. You see that? No longer calibrated colors. Like, oh no. So in standard mode, dynamic mode, vivid mode, or however Samsung calls it, the three modes where you get this resolution back, the colors are completely off, right? So now, just to be fair, let's go back real quick so you guys can see the difference here, right? All three pretty much very close. They're all in their most accurate color modes, and U7G and U8G is out of the box, right? They're not calibrated. The Q90A was calibrated by John Riformato at Valley Electronics, very close, right? But then you go to standard mode, you'll get back this resolution, but now I'm gonna have to go in there and find out how do I tone down that red, there's a lot of issues. There might be a little bit too much blue. Regardless, you got the resolution back. So the question is this, Samsung, why are your three most accurate color modes, why are you losing resolution? I don't understand the science behind it, the reason behind it, because both the U7G and the U8G maintain their color accuracy while preserving the resolution. So that's something that I'll be interested in knowing, because I just assumed that it was the enhanced wide angle viewing. What, did they turn it off? Did they turn wide angle viewing off in standard mode or dynamic mode? I actually didn't check. Maybe they did. We'll see. So Bat, why don't you check the wide angle viewing? Did it change? Did it get worse if you go into standard dynamic mode? So anyway, if you guys are looking straight up into the TV and you don't care much about the wide angle, or you want that extra resolution and you're okay with a slight, I don't know, this extra red or extra blue, extra punchy, this is how you get your resolution back. So, and yeah, Mustafa, you're saying your Q90A looks really close to your OLED. It's the closest you're going to get to OLED with the Q90A. The blacks are deeper. Absolutely. And there's no doubt about it. That's why you get the Q90A, is to get those blacks. However, you've noticed your OLED is probably a little bit brighter in the specular highlights, right? Actually, this scene, check out this scene. If you have the Greatest Showman, compare this with your Q90A, and you'll see that the Q90A right here, right where all the diamonds are, it'll be brighter on the OLED than on the Q90A. But that's just what it is. Yes, Michael, X95J is at Valley Electronics, the larger size, not the 65-inch. So if you need the 85-inch, just give Robert a call. He's calibrating it now, and so we'll talk to him about that. So yeah, let's see what questions there. Okay, so that's saying that in standard mode, even from off angle, nothing's changed. Then that makes it all the worse. Then why? What's happening here? I don't even know how to explain why the resolution drops in. Why does the QN90A and all the other Samsungs, right? I'm sure this affects the QN900A as well. Why does the resolution drop in the most accurate movie mode, calibrated day, or movie mode, or calibrated night, and not in the less accurate modes, right? The brighter, vivid, dynamic standard mode? I don't know. If anyone finds an answer, let me know. But it'll be interesting to find out why Samsung did that. Okay, now we get to the 65-inch OLED TV from Xiaomi. Good news is, more likely than not, this pricing will come to the USA, not from Xiaomi though, possibly from Hisense, because Hisense do make OLEDs, and this is the pricing that they're launching in China. And for many of you saying, wait, if it's in China, of course it'll be cheaper. Not so, not anymore. A lot of the prices in China ends up being very close to the USA. So I'm very confident that if it's launching in China for just above 1,000, it's going to launch in the USA very similar prices. So keep that in mind. Now, we're not going to get a Xiaomi, obviously, right? So Xiaomi is not allowed to be sold in the US because for their countless IP violations. Yeah, I'm sure you all know that. Xiaomi, you guys are crazy. The minute they land in the US, I guarantee you Apple will go after them with a pitchfork and never allow them to sell in the USA. But that aside, Hisense also has access to OLED TV, right? And with NVIDIA G-Sync support, now how good it is, we know VRR is a mess. Vizio was unable to implement it properly. And Panasonic, with the MediaTek chip, who knows if it's going to work, but just look at the price. It's $1,000. Even if you don't game, right? The Vizio as a non-gaming OLED is still a great TV. And so this is another site. They think that the launch is actually a little bit lower. This is where I'm getting the $1,000. So on display specifications, it's at $1,000 US. Again, not going to launch in the US, but this is things to come in 2022. So this is launching in China right now, but in 2022, how many of you believe that the 65-inch TV, the OLED, is going to come to the USA at $1,000? I see this and I'm thinking, okay, this is the tea leaves, right? For sure, by the end of 2022, we're going to start seeing 65-inch $1,000 OLEDs. So this does add a twist for many of you who are thinking of buying a TV now. Should you wait for these cheaper OLEDs? And that's something that I think you should be okay not waiting for, because there's no guarantee that Hisense has figured out OLED processing. So keep that in mind. Hisense has released again an OLED in Europe, the A9G. Yeah, I know. Talk about confusing. Where have we heard the A9G OLED before, right? So they're releasing their A9G OLED in Europe, and it's nowhere near or close to the quality of the Sony A9G OLED. The Hisense OLED in Europe is just getting panned for processing, motion. I mean, it's not good. They've had a year to figure it out, and they still haven't figured out OLED processing. So what makes me think that these less expensive OLED TVs coming to the USA will be any better? And I don't. And that's why I'm not exactly sure if it's worth waiting for, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen as far as quality processing, because Vizio could revisit this, right? So Vizio didn't release an OLED this year, and I think they're probably out of OLEDs by now. But if Vizio is going to revisit releasing an OLED in the USA in 2022, more likely than not, they're going to price it probably around $1,000 like Xiaomi is doing here. So that's something to keep in mind, man. But yeah, I don't know, Brad. I exactly. Xiaomi, I don't know, man. Should you pass? Should you not? And as far as hacking, I think this kind of covers almost every company out there right now, whether it's Xiaomi, Hisense, TCL, it doesn't matter. When you offload it to Google, you completely trust Google. And how often has Google done the mea culpa? Oh, I'm sorry, data leak. I'm sorry, everybody. It's a data leak, but it's free. What do you want, right? And that's Google's excuses. Hey, look, we're not charging you for Google TV. It's part of your TV. If you don't like it, opt out of everything. And even when you opt out, you're going to have leaks. It's definitely an issue. So but I'm still excited that OLED TVs, OLED technology is hitting the $1,000 mark at such a large size. So by 2023, I think we're going to see quality TVs at $1,000. And doesn't mean the LG A1 won't drop to under 1,000. The LG A1, although it's a 60 hertz panel, I'm pretty certain it's going to drop significantly by next year as well, given that it's a year old and it's a 60 hertz panel and it's pretty dim compared to the C1, but it's making its way as far as pricing, introducing an affordable price. And this is going to drive LCD TVs out, meaning the quality LCD TVs that we're seeing, like the X95J, they're going to have a hard time justifying their cost in 2022, 2023. So it's something for everyone to think about. Let's see what we got here in terms of questions. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And let's see here. Sleepy got a question. Thank you for the question. FOMO, do you think that the Hisense dual cell black levels will be super close to OLED? And do you think the brightness will suffer at all? So the black levels definitely will be close. We've seen it already. The U8G and the QN90A. In the blackest parts of the TV, it's the same as OLED. Where they fail is right next to the brightest parts. They're still blooming. So the question is, in the areas where you have blooming, does the dual cell eliminate blooming? And I would say it would probably come close. You can't eliminate it completely until you're self-emissive. The question is, how bright can it get? And that's the issue for dual cell last year. It didn't get that much brighter than OLED. We are being told it will get to 1,000 nits peak brightness. So at 1,000 nits, in those specular highlights, are you going to see blooming? That's the question. And so we'll test it. Now, just to give you guys a heads up, it's not going to release until sometime in September. And then even when it does release, there's going to be an inventory shortage, as you guys all know. Whether I'll get a review sample in September or until much later in the year is a whole other question. So we might have to defer to Robert Zone to talk about it, because Robert at Value Electronics will be carrying the dual cell. So if it's there when I'm at the shootout, for sure, I'll sit down and take some really good 8K close-ups for you guys. So I'm hoping it's there by then, but we don't know. So we'll see. A lot of promises, but as Michael says, how good will it be? All right, let's see. Yes, Robert, a soundbar definitely is going to help you out. But when you get a soundbar, make sure you get one that has a subwoofer option. This is where all the TVs fall short. At around 100 hertz, it starts to drop off significantly. You get a lot of distortion below 100 hertz. A soundbar fixes that at least down to 70 hertz, right? That's where you're going to get some clarity from the soundbar. So definitely get a soundbar with a subwoofer option. I think that gives you the most bang for the buck. And here's the good news. The soundbars have huge sales in Black Friday. And the best part about soundbars is this. Last year's model soundbars are as good as this year's models when it comes to the mid-tier. So don't get a current year mid-tier. Go last year mid-tier and the sound quality will be indistinguishable. Save some money. Get one with a subwoofer that's a 2020 model and I think you'll be fine. OD0 versus DC. What are you referring to when you say DC? I don't know, but for sure, OD0, that's going to be promising. It's an 85-inch. We're all expecting it to be quite literally identical to the QN900A from Samsung. The question being is, how good is the processing from OD0? Can it get as good as Samsung or even better? So that'll be interesting to see, because I know that TCL will not be cutting back on the resolution in the most accurate color modes. That may be the advantage the OD0 needs, and it'll be a lot cheaper than the QN900A. So let's check what that looks like in November, maybe? Maybe OD0 will release in November? Don't know. Okay, so let's see here. Question from Samuel. I'm sorry. Question from Samuel. FOMO, do you think the X95J will handle sports games well? X90J had terrible blooming and it was distracting. So this is what we talked about with the blooming issues. In going for deeper blacks, you're going to get blooming because now that extreme between the deepest blacks and the brightest areas, that difference is blooming, right? And the U7G, as well as the X900H, their approaches will lift the blacks a little bit because the blooming is distracting. So you have a choice. If the blooming is distracting, go for the X900H. Now, we're not talking about gaming. The X90J definitely has better 4K 120 resolution. So let's take gaming out of the equation. If you're just watching sports, movies, streaming, X900H is fine for that, but it doesn't have the blooming. I had the X900H. My biggest problem with the X900H wasn't the blooming, it was the lifted blacks. It just didn't get black enough for me. Well, the X90J fixed that, but now introduced blooming. So I think probably the best solution is to go with X95J if you have the budget. That has more dimming zones. The blacks should be deeper, or go with a QNED 90, which we priced, I think, between the 90J and the 95J. Normally the nanocell models, the LCD models from LG, will be priced lower than Sony's equivalent model, but a little bit more than Sony's entry-level model. So maybe the QNED 90 may be where you want to be if you're not considering gaming at all. But yeah, the X90J has worse blooming than the X900H, but on the other hand, it has deeper blacks, right? So depending on your content, and I think motion on both are fine. So it shouldn't be an issue as far as motion is concerned. All right, let's start to catch up here. Hey, Sean, thanks for the question. Coming from a 14-year-old 55-inch 720p Samsung Plasma, will I regret 3500 77-inch C1 or A80J in a couple of years? Okay, you will not regret it. So, Sean, the good news is this. The OLED technology, as you see it today, is, I say, as mature as you're going to get. I mean, it is so mature. It's safer, right? Less burn-in risk. It's as bright as it's going to be from LG. And even with a heatsink from both Sony and Panasonic, this is Panasonic's third generation heatsink, Sony's first, it's not that much brighter than the LG G1. It is brighter, but it's not like, wow, the world has changed for me. So if you get the C1 or the A80J, you will not be disappointed 5 years from now. Now, 10 years from now, micro LED is in the picture. Okay, we're talking maybe 4,000 nits, right? We're talking brighter, greater color volume, whole different budget too. You're not going to get that at the price you're paying for 3,500, I believe. So you won't regret it. You're going to really enjoy this for the next, I'd say 6 years at least. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to look great. So no worries there. And let's hit the super chat real quick. Hey, Travis Sylvania, long time no see. What movies am I watching lately, and am I still buying disc? Ah, great question. I've been watching direct to streaming releases on HBO Max. I'm catching up with my son on Suicide Squad. So we're watching the first Suicide Squad, then we're going to watch the recent Bird of Prey one, and then we'll watch the Suicide Squad. And what else have we been watching? We saw Raya on Disney Plus. So yeah, I'm watching mostly streaming, but I am still buying discs. I recently bought, oh, I should have told you guys this. Oro 3D has been released in a remastered version of Twister in a region-free format. So you could buy it in Germany, and I'm going to link it for you guys right now. This thing is, I'm so excited. So real quick here, it's the Turbine site, right? So if you guys have a Oro 3D capable system, definitely this is something that I highly recommend. I'm gonna have to talk this up real quick here. I mean, this is just so awesome. I'm just so excited that they're remastering in the proper audio format for everybody. Let me share this real quick. There we go. Okay, this is it. Turbine site, Twister, remastered in both Dolby Atmos and Oro 3D. I ordered it. It's on its way, and I don't know how good it is, but Turbine has a reputation in Europe for being one of the best mastering houses out there. They've been given permission by the US studios to remaster the audio, and I'm just so excited because a lot of these movies, first of all, did not release in Atmos, obviously, but second, the original native Atmos releases now are kind of meh at best. These guys are putting the time to make it awesome. So this is something that I highly recommend. And this is a disc I'm buying. So back to, hey, what kind of discs am I buying? I'm buying these sort of discs from Turbine. Turbine has a couple of releases that I actually picked up recently. So I'll just type in Oro 3D so you guys can see. Oh, what? New hits? Maybe it's not a new hits. I got a Prince one recently. Okay. It's not as easy to find as I had hoped. So Turbine has a couple of movies that are quite good. The Prince concert disc is also in Oro 3D and Atmos. Highly recommended. So if you guys want to try immersive audio, I recommend this site, but double check that what you're getting is region free. If you email them, they will respond in English. Just give them a while. It is a German site, but yeah, this is something that's the reason why I'm buying disc is this. So that's what I'm watching lately. Thank you for that super chat, my friend. Let me get back to our topics of the day. Okay, Samsung QD display, right? Where was I? So if you guys missed my video recently, I posted this. We talked about this Samsung QD display. Is it exciting? Should you wait for it? It is coming in 2022. So the rumor says, right? Let's say for the sake of argument that QD display, formerly known as QD-OLED, but they don't want to call it that because, and let's just address that real quick. The reason why it's no longer called QD-OLED is this. The OLED part is temporary. Eventually, they're going to replace OLED with QNED, right? So QD-OLED will be replaced by QNED. Both of them are QD display technologies. The QD display part is the quantum dot QD color converting layer. That doesn't change. What changed is the backlighting. So the first generation backlighting is OLED, and maybe 3 or 4 years from now, the next generation will be the nanorod or possibly micro LED, or alternatively, maybe even just regular LCD. They are looking for the best blue light possible. And right now, QNED appears to be in the lead. So that's something to keep in mind. The reason why I don't believe that anyone should be buying this is 2 reasons. First, this is Samsung's very first generation quantum dot inkjet printed color converting layer. They've never done this before. We are the guinea pigs. And number 2, the 4 stacks of OLED, I don't think it's going to get bright enough. And lastly, and most importantly, OLED to them is already a dead technology. They're using this as a stopgap measure just to get it out into the market. Their focus and their investment is on making QNED work and get out to market as soon as possible, because QNED is going to be brighter. And the longer they take for QNED to get out, the more excuses they're going to have to make for OLED, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. But for those of you, and most importantly, it's only 55 or 65 inches. So you're paying a premium, but the TV is not that big, right? So that's just something that I think is kind of value proposition is not there. Okay, now for the X95J. If you missed it, Brian posted this. He was at Valley Electronics. They're talking it up. And this is the exciting part. In talking to Brian, who was there, he found the X95J wasn't terrible. So that's the good news. Now, it's obviously, is it a QN90A killer? That's the question. So that's something that I'll let Robert talk about. But definitely for sure, we know what the strength of the X95J will be. And this continues to be Sony's strength, right? And we already know what the weaknesses of the QN90A. The question is there that in between for you guys, the use case? And well, whatever that answer is, because right now the QN90A is the same price as the X95J at the 85-inch size. So that's what makes the QN90A so compelling for me. Yeah, what? It's the same price, right? So that's kind of crazy. Let's check out your questions. I'll try to catch up real quick. And so, yeah, for those of you who missed the earlier conversation, just joined us, G's 1444 was commenting on this loss of resolution, right? The QN90A, in its most accurate movie mode, right here, you lose resolution, not just contrast, but actual pixels. They're being merged together, whereas the resolution, the U7G and the U8G is maintained. However, if you go into the less accurate color modes, not Cal Day, not Cal Night, and not movie mode, and not filmmaker mode. Filmmaker mode, I think, is the worst. If you go into the standard mode, oh, it's back. Resolution's back, but then suddenly the color's all off. And so that's what Jess was referring to is this a bug that they can fix? And maybe it is. And that's something that honestly, maybe Samsung missed it. Maybe this live stream, you guys telling them, I'm going to reach out to Robert and let him know about it as well. If this was intentional, they're never going to fix it, because that means it's a domino effect, right? It's affected by some other processing. But if this was unexpected, maybe we'll get a fix. So hopefully we'll see. But yeah, geez, when you have your Q95A on Monday, get out the Greatest Showman and check out this scene and let us know if you saw that issue on your TV between standard and filmmaker or movie mode. But pretty much Bat and I see it, and it's quite disappointing because it is what it is. And Ahmad is saying, why don't we just raise the sharpness at 8? Raising the sharpness at 8 will get you artifacts that aren't there. So that it brings in an additional issue. Now, I haven't tried it because I normally don't like sharpness off of 0, only because it's introducing additional spottiness sometimes. But if it works, hey, try it, let me know. But I think Samsung's going to have to fix this because clearly there's something wrong. Or maybe they accidentally toggled sharpness down. Who knows, right? But yeah, definitely an issue. Okay, here. Good question, Rockstar. Are there any big differences between the X85J and the X900H when it comes to picture quality? The answer is yes. 2 things. First, the X900H is actually positioned as a better TV the year it was released. The X85J has 2 shortcomings. First, it doesn't have any full array local dimming zones. And second, it is designed to fall below the X90J, which means it is below the X900H. Motion should be the same. What you're going to miss out on the X85J are 2 things. One, it will not get as bright as the 900H. And second, its blacks will not be as deep. Now, if you're in a brighter room, you might need the extra brightness of the X900H. Now, the X900H is not that bright to begin with, by the way. It is barely bright enough. And I recommend you watch Classy's review on the X85J. He was deeply disappointed in the X85J, actually. So I know if you were to ask him, he would highly recommend the X900H over the X85J as far as picture quality, right? We're not talking gaming or anything like that. Now, even in gaming, he wasn't impressed by the 85J anyway, so it's not like it has an advantage. So yeah, I'd say X900H is better than the 85J for the reasons that Classy pointed out. Okay, let's talk dimming zones. Do you know how many dimming zones the X95J has? Generally, we do. The X95J has the same number of dimming zones as last year's X950H, which is, I believe, 60 dimming zones on the 65-inch. But whatever it was last year is being carried over this year. However, it is brighter. It is noticeably brighter than the X950H. And that's what we expected. Now, it's not like QN90A bright, but it's brighter. And the X950H was pretty bright to begin with. So that's great. And it's blacks. I was talking to Brian. He felt that the blacks were a little bit deeper. It's just incremental improvement. So how about that? It is definitely an incremental improvement over the 950H. So that's something to think about. The 950H, we highly recommend it, by the way, for regular movie watching and streaming. Unless your room is pitch dark, in most moderately lit rooms, 950H is a great TV. So the X95J takes that and makes it better. So hopefully that helps you. Now, remember that the QN90A is positioned above the X95J. So it's not quite a fair comparison. The QN90A is a flagship 4K TV. It's got a great remote. It's got the trim, and its audio should be better. Doesn't mean it is. Overall, the QN90A is the better TV. However, if you start to pick it apart, the X95J, like all Sonys, has its strengths. And whether its strengths does it compensate for its shortcomings compared to the QN90A? Because the QN90A will always have the deepest blacks among 4K LCD TVs. That's just what Samsung does very well. It's aggressive local dimming zones, and it has 800 local dimming zones, right? X95J is not going to better the QN90A in a dark room. So if you need OLED blacks in a dark room, it's the Q90A, short of getting an OLED. But the X95J in a brighter room, well, you know what? I'm not going to make that prediction. We'll check it out. We'll see. As soon as the 65-inch is released, I'll get it, but I honestly don't know when that's going to be. So. Hey Theo, well, you know why I know? It's because the guys in Germany emailed me. So if you catch some of my other videos where I spoke to Patrick of Groby TV, the minute that released, he reached out to me and says, "Hey, get your copy now because it's gonna run out." And so I did. But yeah, and the minute I saw it, I believe I announced it. So definitely, guys, get in line, pre-order it for the next release if it's sold out. But keep an eye on Turbine. They do such a phenomenal job at releasing these remastered discs where it would be perfect in full 3D audio. Both the Atmos and the Oro 3D, always amazing from what I've heard. So something to keep in mind if you guys are disc collectors. That's right, Brad. Get it, especially if you have Oro 3D capability. Definitely. Okay, so let's move down the list here. All right, so this is where we ended. And check comments. Okay, now let's talk about the X95J. We're not going to go into the image quality because two reasons. And we've noticed this, both Brian, myself, and Brandon and Classy. One of the issues with jumping to conclusions about a TV, even when it's released, even when you have it in hand, as we all know, firmware updates start releasing like crazy, right? Cascading in the first month or two. They're still figuring it out. So I'd say after 3 months, once the firmware, all the important ones have released, we get a better sense of what the TV is. So even these early reviews, any flaws that I identify might end up getting fixed. For example, and this is a great one that Brian reminded me, the 8 series from TCL, right? The first 8 series, the first mini LED ever released in the USA. I reviewed it. I got it the first month it was out. I have to tell you, I was floored by the deep blacks and the contrast and the brightness, but I was so disappointed by a couple of issues. It kept on shutting down. The Roku was, I think, broken out of the box. It kept on rebooting, and I had issues with color. It was oversaturated, and the dimming zone control was a bit off. But that was, what, 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago? Today, I'm hearing that all those fixes have been slowly rolling out. It is a significantly different and better TV today. And the reason I returned it was I couldn't stand the reboot, right? I'm like, come on, man. I couldn't finish the review without it rebooting like 3 times. So I figured it was either a bad TV altogether or this was a Roku issue, but I had too many TVs at the time. So I just said to Best Buy, I'll pass this year and I'll see if they reintroduce it next year. And they never did. The 8 series from TCL, that is a better mini LED backlight system than the 6 series that was released the following year. So the R635, although also mini LED, it is not of the same quality as the 8 series mini LED. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just get the 6 series. Technically, the 8 series is a better TV. It has a lot of specifications and details that is a step above the 6 series version of the mini LED. Now, this year's mini LED, the R646 update to the 6 series, it may end up being a lot better than last year. So I can't wait to get that one as well to compare to the U7G. So that's something for you guys to look forward to. And this is exactly what I'm thinking, Brad. How good is the X95J compared to the 646? The X95J likely will drop to around $1,600. The 646 is right now around $1,300, or it will be released at $1,300, right? Whenever they can get the 65-inch out. That's only a few $100 difference. Now, the X95J 65-inch isn't available yet. So, but I'd say 6 months from now, they'll all be available. Is it going to be that much better than the 6 series? We don't know. So I can't wait to find out. So yeah, this is a good year for TVs, everybody. Definitely. Last year was generally a disappointment a lot with the Sony VRR fiasco. This year, LCD TVs really stepped up. OLEDs, they got brighter. Sony A80J, A90J, phenomenal, right? The G1. Everything this year, I think, has been pretty good given we have issues in the inventory constraints. Not bad at all. And the pricing, surprisingly, it was the Hisense and TCL prices that creeped upward. So that was quite a surprise for me. All right. Thank you, Leo, for the question. Hey, FOMO, do you think the TCL OD0 will be priced at 3,500 or less? And will it have VRR support? Thanks. I don't think it can be because currently the 85-inch TCL 8K, just a regular 8K, I think is like what, $3,000. So the OD0 will have to be higher than that, like significantly higher. Was it 75-inch? Like I think the 8K 75-inch 6 series is $3,000, right? So there's no way an 85-inch OD0 will be only $500 more. I believe it'll be more like 4,500 or higher. So if you are looking forward to the 85-inch OD0 8K, think above 4,000 at minimum. At launch, probably high 4,000s, and then maybe 6 months later, it'll go down closer to 4,000, 4,500. Now, will it have VRR support? That's hard to know because at least Samsung 8K has VRR support. TCL, I don't know. That one, hard to predict because 8K VRR is not easy to do. Samsung's done it, but then they have their own chip manufacturing plant, so they figured it out. Can whatever chip TCL is using handle it? Remains to be seen, so we'll see. Is the A90J the best TV in the world? Well, if you're a gamer, it's not. But if you're a movie watcher, yeah, I think it is the best movie watching TV right now, in my opinion. And if it isn't, it's pretty darn close. Now, when you say the world, you're also including the Panasonic JZ 1500 in that equation. And some people will argue that is better than the A90J. So, you know what? I think we're close. How about this? It's the top three. I am safe with saying that the A90J is one of the top 3 best movie watching TVs in the world. Hey, Paul, thanks for the question. And of course, let me throw this out there. Don't forget to click like if you're enjoying this live stream, because I know I am. Hey, Paul, thanks for the question. How do you think QD-OLED will compare to the LG C10 and C1 specs and price-wise? Great question. So let's go to this theme, the Samsung QD display. Price-wise, it will be more expensive than the A90J. It just has to be for 2 reasons. One, it is an all-new technology stack. Remember, LG Display has been making OLEDs for a long time, and they've opened up a Chinese factory. So their pricing for OLED is, at this point, mainstream cut rate, right? The QD display, you're using first-generation tooling, first-generation everything, and they're going to have to amortize all that cost. Guess what? We're paying for it. Remember when OLED first was released 8 years ago, 10 years ago? It was like, what, $10,000 for a tiny TV? It's not going to be that bad, but at a 55-inch size and a 65-inch size, I'm expecting $5,000. So keep that in mind, right? Maybe $5,000 for a 55-inch size. So let's say we're lucky that it's 5,000 at 55 inches. Okay, what are the specs? So color, it must be a higher color volume right here. See this? 80%. For the first time, we're going to see above 80% BT 2020 on an OLED-like technology. But more importantly, can it look brighter despite being dimmer? And this is something that is going to be quite controversial. Samsung Display is already saying, okay, you know what? If you take out a light meter, it will be dimmer. But there's this effect where when we give you more color saturation, your eyes will make you think it's brighter. Okay, is this BS? Is this real? The research is out there. I'm not going to make that determination now, but at the end of the day, the reputation of QD OLED right now is that it's too dim. And this is from TV makers that passed on it, right? Sony has passed on it. Samsung Electronics passed on it until recently. And so Samsung Display has working really hard to up the brightness. And this remains an issue for QD OLED. Now, did they work? Did they achieve it? Did they succeed? We'll see. So spec-wise, I don't expect peak brightness to be better than the C10 or the C1, but color volume, color saturation, color gamut definitely will be. But we all know that brightness makes the biggest difference. Well, no, size makes the biggest difference. Then comes brightness. And then comes color gamut near the very end. I put it right there with resolution. Regular OLED today, even at its current gamut, is definitely great. But here's something that no one understands. Your content is not graded to BT 2020. It may be in a 10-bit container with BT 2020 as its container, but the color gamut is still DCI P3, right? So unless you get the right movie, you won't even be able to take advantage of this extra color saturation unless you bring up the brightness to preserve that saturation. But if it's graded to 200 nits, it's only going to go up to 200 nits. What's the point? So it's something to keep in mind. Unless there's actual content made specifically for this QD-OLED, QD display, you're not going to see a huge difference. So that's just something that I think is going to take a while for content makers, studios, to catch up with as well. Suddenly they have this one TV that can handle a wider gamut. Are they going to make content just for that one TV? Probably not for a while. So something to keep in mind. And I just want to raise this comment. Thank you, Brad. Daryl, I think Be The Installer is going to do an 83 versus A90J 83 comparison. Yes. So I have the A90J 83 inch. He has mine. And before he gives it to me, I said, look, people want to know what is the biggest difference between both, right? And the 83 inch size. We know it's going to be brighter, the A90J. The question is, how much brighter? And that's what he wants to know is, in real content, does it make a difference? And ultimately, if it doesn't, well, a lot of people are going to save about $2,000 in getting the C1. And it's something I've been recommending. Oh, look, that extra $2,000 to $3,000 with the A90J, that's a lot of money. And if you're pushing it, just get the 83-inch C1. And in a dark room, it's going to look great regardless. So, yeah. Correct, Mustafa. So it's not true RGB the way OLED true RGB is, but what it's doing with the QD display is this. The color filter is going to convert the blue light into red and green. The actual blue light will go right through the color filter. It won't be filtered at all, or if it is filtered, barely. So here's the problem with quantum dot color converting filter or color converting layer. There's blue leakage. And this blue leakage gets worse as it gets brighter. And so that's what they've been trying to fix. And so this affects the color gamut, the color purity. So you can see if they got brighter, you end up with more blue leakage, and then that kind of disrupts it. So because it's not true RGB, meaning you're not going to have a blue subpixel in the quantum dot, it's just red and green that will be quantum dot. The blue will be coming from the OLED. So the OLED, or the backlighting, in this case, the backlighting is OLED, will be supplying the blue. And then they're filtering that blue into red and green, and then whatever combination gives you the rainbows. So that's an excellent question that I think not a lot of people realize. The blue is being supplied by the OLED, or the backlighting. Okay, super chat. Thank you, Geo1741. In the UK, a 75-inch X95J is £3,399. The 75-inch Q98 is £2,800. Does this make the Samsung the one to buy? I think so. What is Sony playing at? Okay, so here's the thing. In the USA, it's nothing like this. I think there are shipping issues that's making the Sony artificially more expensive. And also, this is at MSRP launch. In the USA right now, the Q90A is about the same price as the Sony X95 at launch, but we know that in about 6 months, that price will drop like a rock, just like the Q90A, right? 6 months ago, the Q90A at launch, hella expensive. Right now, it's the right price where it should be for a flagship, for a KTV. So I would not pay more for the Sony. Definitely not, because the Q90 is just a phenomenal TV. Now, if you need Dolby Vision, and that's the only reason I need Dolby Vision, well, then you wouldn't consider the Q90 anyway, right? But if you need Dolby Vision, maybe you should look at the LG QNED 99, right? Forget that it's an 8K TV, but the QNED 99 should be a better TV than the X95J at the same size. So something to think about. I think the QD-99 is an unsung possibility. Now, we know that Brandon did not like the QD-99 at the 65-inch size. So it's something that I'm going to take a look at when I talk to Robert and address specifically the weaknesses of the QD-99, which was blooming, right? Brandon did not like the blooming in the brightest scenes. He didn't care for it. Yeah, the blacks got deep in the areas that should be black, but in the areas where the brightest areas touched the black, the blooming was noticeable. But then he has an OLED, and people who have an OLED, we notice the blooming. So yeah, I think this is, so to your question, Gio, I do think this is unique to Europe, this price disparity. The X95J as a what we call a pricing strategy, it is not a flagship TV, number one. Number two, it is not a master series either. The QN90A, in fact, is what Samsung would call their flagship master series. The 8K is their best master, their best flagship, but that 8K has a lot of additional zones, and I don't think it's that much better than the QN90A, but you know what? Differing minds. In the larger sizes, that 8K does make a difference. At 65-inch, I think the QN90A is probably the better TV. So something to keep in mind, my friends. Yes, I'm doing a stream solo today. People are on vacation, traveling. I'll be on vacation 2 weeks, so it'll be Brandon. Hopefully, if he's back, he'll be doing a stream. So, hey, Leo, thanks for the comment. I have the LG Q99 8K. It does have Dolby Vision gaming at 120. Dang, there we go. That answered my question. Okay, let's take a deep breath and talk about this just for a second. Pictures out of this world, so bright and black, HDR beautiful. And this is what Brian was telling me. He thought that 85-inch just shocked the heck out of him. So it is currently $1,000 less expensive than the QN900A. And the QN99 85-inch is Brian's choice over the QN900A for two reasons. It has less blooming and it's actually brighter. And Dolby Vision gaming at 4K 120, that is the topping, right? The cherry on top of this whipped cream. So it doesn't have VRR, right, Leo? Just double checking, because I know the specs do not have VRR, but 4K 120 Dolby Vision might end up being more important, because on a console, lock it down at 60 frame rates, then you're done. You don't have to worry about VRR anyway, right? And unless you're playing, what was that, Sea of Thieves expansion pack, where VRR is necessary because the tearing is terrible, most other titles, not an issue. So thank you, Leo, for that input. I'm excited to see the QNID99 at the larger size as well when I get to Value Electronics later during the shootout. Yeah. Okay, thank you for the super chat, Griffin. You've been postponing the delivery of the A80J 77-inch for months. Warranty exchange for your Sony A1E 65-inch. Let's see, you got an X90J 50-inch and have enjoyed it, especially compared to the A1E. Should you get the X95J 75 instead? A lot to unpack here. So I'd say the A80J 77-inch is significantly a better TV than the X95J. Both of them are mid-tier for Sony, right? The A80J is just below its Master Series A90J, and the X95J is below its Master Series Z9J 8K Master Series LCD TV. But between the two mid-tiers, the A80J 77-inch is benefiting from two things. One, it's the new EVO panel from LG, and two, this new EVO panel takes full advantage of the XR processor. The X95J cannot, because it cannot get to deep black or true black. It cannot take advantage of that entire range and contrast ratio that the A80J can. This allows the XR chip to really stretch its legs, right? It's got the dynamic range, it's got the true black, it can show off. X95J, you're holding back the XR chip. So, to answer your question, no. If you can't afford the A80J 77-inch, hold on to that delivery. You'll love it. End of story. X95J offers nothing beyond what the A80J has, except for maybe it's less expensive and the likelihood of burn-in is so slim. But if you're afraid of burn-in, okay, X95J, and of course brightness, SDR, average picture level, everything that has to do with brightness, it'll be a little bit brighter in a brighter room. But if those things aren't a concern all day long, the A80J 77-inch is what someone said earlier. Was the Sony A90J the best movie watching TV? Well, the A80J comes so close, I'd label it right in there, my top 3 as well. Okay, let's go through your questions real quick here. There are a lot of comments. And yeah, that is a big deal. We didn't get confirmation because it was not emphasized at all in the spec sheet. And if you look at LG's own page, I don't think they mentioned Dolby Vision at 120. So this is great. Now, whether it's working well or not is all that matter. But hey, if it's showing on the Series X, you know what? Until I'm being told otherwise, life is so short not to get excited when you can, right? So yeah, I think it's a big deal. And it may sway a lot of people to the QD-99 now. I think for gamers at this size, at this flagship, the Samsung QN900A has just lost a whole niche of potential customers because of Dolby Vision 4K 120 gaming. That's a huge deal. But remember this, the Samsung QN900A offers VRR. Can't have everything, can you? So that's pretty cool. What killed 3D? You guys killed 3D. How many of you bought 3D anything when there was no demand for 3D? Because here's the thing. When you did buy the 3D TVs, I don't think anyone tried to turn on the 3D content. They lost their glasses or the glasses didn't fit. As long as 3D requires glasses, I think that's what kills it. And also 3D requires you to have a larger screen for that immersive effect, and 3D in 4K simply doesn't exist. It's so hard to do 3D in 1080p. We're at 4K now. Processing 3D in 4K right now is not worth the investment. So as we move to 4K, that kind of killed 3D as well. Combination of glasses and 4K and brightness. Everyone wants to win the brightness war. Well, 3D is not as bright. And the TV makers didn't want to deal with it. It's just too much to deal with right now. So, and VRR, we've got to deal with VRR and 3D and the MediaTek chip. No, that's kind of it. It's just too many technologies that have to work together. I understand. I feel for them, but I feel for you. I do like 3D, but the glasses, and there's too many variables there. Active glasses, passive glasses, or the technology where you don't need glasses at all. That is the dream, really. And how are you enjoying 3D? Are you watching it in 1080p and not caring, because 3D is 3D at the end of the day? And this is exactly the issue, right? You need it large, and the best 3D effect is probably projector screens. All right, let me catch up to your questions here. Okay, RJ Double, thank you for the question. Hey, FOMO, thanks for this stream. I'm still running with an LG C7. Ooh, wow. Just before they fixed burn-in, huh? Do you think the C1 is a worthy upgrade? Absolutely. Just to prevent burn-in, there it is, right? All the algorithms in the C1 very much optimized to avoid burn-in. I do spend probably 50% of my time gaming, but I'm pondering if I should wait it out. Okay, so let me tell you what you'll get if you wait it out. If you wait, the C series, more likely than not, is going to get some form of a heat sink, right? So next year, two things are happening across the board for LG OLEDs. First, they will all be the EVO OLED panel. Now, the EVO OLED panel is not necessarily, quote unquote, a better panel. It's a more efficient panel, so it burns less energy. And more importantly for LG, it's cheaper to make, right? The way they produce this OLED panel, it costs less, and it allows them to push it a little harder so it can handle brightness and is more resistant to burn-in. So all of that's important. It doesn't necessarily translate to a better picture quality per se. I think the processor improvements are doing that. So the worthy upgrade really is for next year. It'll get brighter. If the C series, which I expect, gets some form of a heat sink to push it harder, it'll get brighter, but it can only get so bright, right? We've already seen the limits of its brightness. The limit of its brightness is what the Panasonic is doing. just at 900 nits, I'd say, and that's in the less accurate mode. In the more accurate mode, maybe 800 nits. Is it worth it for an extra 800, for an extra 100 nits or so? A lot of people say yes, and this is where the A80J separates itself. But that's not because it's a better panel. It's because it's the XR chip. So the question is, if you wait until next year, more likely than not, LG will improve its processor, maybe copy the XR chip, seeing why it's so popular, and you'll benefit from the improved processing of the C2. Now, if it doesn't do anything other than what it does this year, then no, just get it now. So just down the horizon. Now, if you're in a pitch dark room, right, it's pretty much light controlled, you can get it now, and next year, you're not going to blast your eyes with a brighter TV. If you're in a brighter room, it might be worth waiting for. So, but 50% of your time gaming, the biggest issue right now with OLED, all OLEDs, is the VRR flicker at near black, and that's an OLED technology problem. Will LG fix it next year? It remains to be seen. But if they do fix it, well, maybe you should have waited. So if you're a gamer, I say wait, because we don't know what's going to come down the pipe in the C2 series. It might be worth waiting for, especially if you don't have to buy now. Good question. Yes, they did, Robert. So this is a great question. Why don't TV makers mix LCD, LED with OLED to make OLEDs brighter? So this is the issue. The OLEDs are self-emissive. So the OLED makes its own light. LCD, LED, the LCD layer makes no light at all. The LED is what brings the brightness to the LCD TV. So with mini LED, that brings brightness to the TV. OLED doesn't have any additional technology to bring any further brightness. The pixel itself is lit in an OLED subpixel, so it has to drive that pixel harder and harder. The problem is, if you drive the OLED pixel too hard, it overheats and it either burns out or burns in or dies or shortens its life, all bad. So OLED cannot exceed 1,000 nits for its own safety, right? If it goes over 1,000 nits, it'd be maybe 2 seconds and it's got to go back down. LED, on the other hand, could stay at 2,000 nits forever and nothing would happen because it's not organic, it's not unstable. However, if the LED is that bright, now you have to control the brightness because the LCD layer, it can't control the brightness. You can get blooming, lifted blacks, the contrast is going to be terrible. So they invented full array local dimming. So this is Samsung's solution, the QD display. They made the quantum dot layer. This is what's replacing the LCD layer. And then instead of LED, they're replacing it with OLED, which is kind of weird because OLED's not bright to begin with, but it does put out a good blue. And that's why they did it. Apparently, the LED blue isn't narrow enough, right? The blue spectrum from the LED doesn't get narrow enough, but the OLED does. However, the nanorod LED, that blue spectrum is even more narrow. It's just so expensive to make right now, and they're not done developing its process. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. That's why LCD, LED can't mix with OLED. OLED is self-emissive. You don't need the LED. And hopefully I didn't ramble too much, but that was a good question. Oh, Preston, another one. Let's talk OLED. OLED is too dim, they say. So why is my luminance set at only 30 for the football game right now? Too dim, my butt. So first of all, are you in a dark room? If you're in a dark room, okay, well, let's have some context. Everyone, your old TVs, your CRTs, right, the giant tube TVs from the 1980s, you guys all understand that the brightest those TVs got was like 100 nits, right? So, and 30 nits isn't bad, right? That TV, you got 30 nits more often than not when you're watching content, including a football game, right? If you watch the football game on an old tube TV, it was probably 30 nits. So if it was okay in the 80s, it's okay today. The question is, in the bright room, is 30 nits enough? And a lot of people want it brighter to fight the ambient lighting. But in a dark room, yeah, 30 nits is fine, not a biggie, right? It's the HDR peak specular highlights. That peak specular highlights, for many people, they want it brighter. So when people say Dolby Vision, 10,000 nits, right? That 10,000 nits is not the whole screen. By golly, if it was 10,000 nits, the entire screen, yeah, it would just flash out your eyeballs. What they're saying is 10,000 nits for that hair, right? Oh, here's an example right here for that right here. That diamond right there, that maybe at 8,000 nits, everything else being the same, nothing brighter. But if the diamonds are suddenly 10,000 nits, right? It's like, whoa, what is that, right? And that's what we're talking about. These little specular highlights, right? Now, not her forehead. We don't want that to be at 10,000 nits, but, or that little sparkle in her eye, right? The tiniest sparkle. Imagine that at 5,000 nits, everything else being the same. But we can't do that right now. No OLED can do it. No LCD TV can do it, because if this little diamond went to 4,000 nits, this entire image would blow up and be blooming halo mess. And so they keep it at maybe 1,500 nits to 1,000. And even this is not that high, because if it did, you're going to see some blooming right here, right? And so that's why it's not bright enough for the specular highlights. We're talking about these little things, right? Good question. Yeah, these little fine details. If that is 4,000 nits, the tiny little diamonds, a whole different world. And hopefully that kind of gives you guys some idea of why we want specular highlights to be bright. And right here is an example of not enough contrast. Now, this TV is a little bit brighter than these two. So it's the exposure is not compensating for how bright this TV really is. So it's not that bad. It actually, all three of them are very similar. But I'm just going to use this as an example. When your entire scene is lifted bright, the diamonds cannot separate itself. But in an OLED or in a self-emissive display, where the individual diamond can then get super bright and let all the other pixels stay dim, that's when the immersiveness happens, like in real life. So yeah, great question. Hey, thanks for the super chat, Spillage. FOMO, did you say your new theater is done? How do the Oro 3D tracks sound? What equipment do you end up with? And congrats. So everything is almost here. One thing I am missing, and I'm waiting for before I can get it installed, is I need my overhead voice of God. So that's yet to be installed. But all the equipment is actually in place. The last piece is the 83-inch A90J that is on its way to Brandon. But in the meantime, I could use any TV. It really doesn't matter. I really want to check out the audio. So it's so close. I had to push off my install until I got the speaker, the Voice of God speaker, but everything else is there. And the subwoofer, oh my gosh, the JTR 4000 ULF Captivator is so huge. I didn't realize how big it was. It is the size of a coffin, right? I'm serious. It goes up to my waist, like up here. And these are a pair of 18-inch drivers side by side. I got the low flat version, so it looks like a couch. So I could easily move it around like a coffee table. And I had to use appliance wheels underneath so I can move it around. It's like over 200 pounds, but that allows me to definitely confirm whether there is any content below 20 hertz. And what does it do for you, right? Does it shake the house down? Does it disturb the neighbors at reference level? So we'll have fun and play with content that's there, or check to see if content is there or not. But yeah, thanks for asking, Spillage. Hey, Bat. Robert does have contact at Samsung, so I'm going to give Robert the information that we talked about. He will let Samsung know. Now, whether Samsung will do anything about it is another issue. But what I'd like to get from Robert, or what Robert's going to ask, is number one, why is this happening? Is this intentional? Did you know about it? If so, what was the trade-off, right? Now, if not, that's great. That means it's a bug that they could address. But if it's not a bug and it's just a compromise, I'm going to ask Robert to follow what was the trade-off? What did we get in return for that loss of resolution? So as soon as this live stream is done, I'm going to reach out to Robert. Now, just to give you guys a heads up, Samsung is not as responsive as Sony and LG to these sort of questions, even from Robert. So just give you guys an FYI. If they're responsive, great. If they give a typical marketing, we'll look into it. who knows how long that's going to take, right? But yeah, I will reach out to Robert and we'll see what he says, because I know that Robert doesn't know this yet unless you watch this video, right? And we'll talk about it. And I will be talking to Robert later this week. We're setting up a time. So yeah, ask again during the live stream, Bat, just in case he didn't get to my email. So, oh, and by the way, Robert is so backed up with your reservations, all of you. Yeah, he's just like, he didn't realize that quality control apparently is a thing. So he's doing his best to get caught up with all the quality control for you guys and all the calibration. I believe D-Nice is now his calibrator, right? John Reformato has retired. Replacement is Dwayne D-Nice. You guys may know him from AVS forums, right? So he's another qualified calibrator. So that'll be fun to compare his calibration against John's, but ultimately it shouldn't be any different. All right, Preston, contrast on the U7G and UHG looks better than Q90 in those pictures. Yeah, and there's a lot of things to unpack here. Absolutely, but it's because I had it in accurate movie mode. In movie mode, the QN90A, there's a bug. Contrast and resolution has dropped. In standard mode, it's actually very close, if not identical. What you'll notice, though, is the color is completely off. And this is the problem with all TVs, right? Sony's included. When you put in standard, vivid, dynamic, you're going to start pushing a lot of blue, a lot of red. Everything is over saturated. And it's really reserved for sports and maybe gaming where you want that pop. But for close-ups like this, where you know what the color of her face is supposed to be, it's definitely not this blushed or flushed, right? So yeah, this is in standard mode. So I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. This is what it should be. But as you saw, yep, you lose a little bit of contrast and resolution here. And that's what we're talking about. But the color is great. All three, by the way. And this is why the U7G, if you guys don't know already, I'm going to put out the review probably tomorrow morning. But the U7G, definitely my choice for the best TV at $1,000, 65-inch. And yes, I would choose it over the U8G. That's I know it's a spoiler, but I have to tell you guys, I am so floored by the quality of the U7G. This is just, I'm going to have to revisit this. I've done my review of the U7G, went through streaming, Netflix, and everything. And this U7G is literally the U8G without the blooming. I mean, right here, you can see some of the blooming, right? The U8G with less blooming, better control. The only weakness is its blacks are slightly lifted, but it's lifted across the board. And the peak specular highlights are a touch less bright. But the result is the image has less noticeable blooming. And the QN90A kills it with blooming, but there was a compromise elsewhere. So you're never going to have everything. Between the various trade-offs, I would pick the U7G because the blooming or the lack of blooming is less distracting than the U8G's brighter highlights, but then more blooming. But then a lot of you watch content where blooming isn't an issue. Let's say you don't watch this content, right? Where you have a lot of blacks against white. Then U8G is great because in brighter content, it's phenomenal. But the U7G looks almost as good. That's what kills me. It's not that much less bright. Now, on patterns that you would see on ratings, yeah, the U7G falls short. But in movies like this, I honestly could not tell the difference. Actually, the U7G was spot on compared to the QN90A. So, yeah, if you guys are on the fence at $1,000 and you're debating between the U7G and U8G, pick the U7G unless you have a specific reason to get the U8G, which is you watch only bright sporting content and you're in a bright room and you need that extra 100 nits. So, all right. Where did that go? Here we go. How's everyone doing? Glad to have you guys on board. And let's see here. Oh, what was that? Okay. Let me make sure I go through all of my slides. There we go. And of course, if I missed your question, please ask. because I'm going solo today. So yeah, if you have a comment you want to highlight, just let me know and I will make sure to highlight it. Here we go. Okay. But this just goes to show that even flagship TVs, it doesn't matter who it is, right? Whether it's a flagship Samsung, Sony, or LG, you have to know what you're giving up. If you know what your compromise is, if you know what you're giving up, hey, you're an informed buyer, and that's all that counts. You won't have FOMO. You will not have FOMO because you know what you're giving up. And that's all I want to make sure people know is, hey, this is what you're missing. And if you're okay with missing that, if you're okay with the face being slightly red, but you get the resolution, hey, nothing wrong with that. Any thoughts on the TCL C825? If this is the original mini LED, I love it. It is now a great TV. If you have one available, get it. Other than the original mini LED released in 2019, I'm not familiar with any other 8 series TCL in the USA. So in the US, if it's that original 8 series mini LED and you have it available at a good price, I think it's a phenomenal TV. It is literally one of the brightest TVs you can get. Its dimming zones combined with its local dimming algorithm, it's pretty solid for an LCD TV. So it's kind of like the Q9FN, right? People talk about it still. You're getting that legacy type of image. Now, it's really hot. It burns a lot of energy, but performance, I think, is great, especially HDR. Get it for HDR content. All right, Samsung Neo QLED Mini LED lineup 2022. I would be shocked if they pushed the performance envelope beyond what it is this year. I think we're at the limit of what you can do with full array local dimming zones, right? Look at the QN98, 800 dimming zones, and they still gave up a little bit on color accuracy or resolution. There's something happening when you have that many dimming zones. I don't know what it is yet, but I don't know. I mean, it'll be incremental. So let's say they fix it. Maybe in 2022, they fix this resolution issue. So that's an incremental upgrade, but it's not like, run out and sell your TV and spend another $3,000 in a TV. So don't expect the upgrade to be more than incremental. I think that's important to emphasize. All right, let's take last set of questions. I'll be on for another, 15 minutes, right? Let's go 90 minutes. I'll be on for another 15 minutes. If any questions you want to ask, let me know. Free for all today, or any questions about home theater, sound bars, anything. If I can answer, I will. If not, I'll try to direct you somewhere. Okay, Javi, is it okay using my Sony A80J 8 to 10 hours a day with different content? Any specific advice for how many hours a day to have it running? Worried because it's brand new. Go at it, Javi. Today's TVs, I am not worried about burning at all, especially you're saying different content. Remember, the issues are like you watch CNN, you have a ticker below, like my ticker right here. Please click like, my friends. If you have something that's on and persistent all the time, yeah, that's going to be an issue. But if you don't, and what the heck, is that better? Maybe that'll, I can't find a position where it doesn't cover my face. If you don't find if you don't have content that has a persistent logo, and even with a persistent logo, LG is doing a great job with this algorithm, as well as Sony, to prevent burn-in. I'm not worried at all. You can run it 24 hours, and it's not an issue if you have diverse content. Just know that OLED in general has a shorter lifetime than an LCD TV. And we're talking, many LCD TVs could last maybe 12 years. The OLED, after about, let's say 8 years, there's some dimming, but the whole TV is dim. We're not talking like spots that are dimmer than other spots, right? OLED is just organic. It's unstable. After 8 years of heavy watching, it'll be a little bit dimmer than when you first bought it, but that's about it. Put an OLED picture there too, so you can know which one is close to the best picture. So here is always the issue of comparing OLEDs with LCD TVs. And I'm sure many of you realize this. LCD TVs are definitely brighter. So the only thing is, in certain content, it is actually exactly the same. This is one of those content where OLED probably has the same brightness as the LCD TVs. Probably. I'm going to have to take a closer look. But in something like Mad Max, the OLED is so much dimmer. You can't put them next to each other because then I have to change the exposure. In this image, I believe the OLED in the OLED, I may have to take down the brightness of the LCD TVs a notch. The good news is this: on an LCD TV, if you take down the brightness, you don't affect color accuracy. And you don't affect the HDR effect either, but what you do is at least you allow them to be compared. But then you don't get the full effect of the LCD's peak specular highlights. So when I match them for exposure, the LCD TVs don't always show off their potential, right? So that's just something to think about. And if I let the OLED do its thing, it ends up being too bright on the specular highlights, which is also sometimes inaccurate. So, but next time I'll do, well, in my review, I normally do that when I compare flagship like the Q90A against OLEDs, but I'll try to do it on one of these and see if it works out. But yeah, good request. Marvisun says, I want so badly 85-inch, but every model has its issues, and they're a lot more expensive compared to 77-inch OLED. Well, that's where we are today. So you have an 83-inch OLED. If that's in your wheelhouse this year, just wait. Next year, the 83-inch OLEDs will be significantly less expensive. And if you wait another year, I believe the 83-inch OLED will definitely be where we are today with 85 inches. LG is expanding its production line for the 83-inch size. So in about 2 years, yeah, it'll be very accessible. And so if you're waiting for OLED, I'd say maybe worth waiting 2 years if that's the size you want and it's an OLED you want. Because today, even the C183-inch at $5,000, it could be under 4,000, maybe even 3,500 in 2 years, easily. Samsung wants to steal the OLED buyers from LG and Sony and persuade you to wait until next year to pay MSRP for new technology. Absolutely. And worse yet, it's only a 55-inch TV for a smaller TV that costs more than the equivalent OLED. It'll be interesting. You know what, Brad? It'll be fun to see. What's their marketing angle? Like, what can they say to convince us? So let's do this. When CES launches, let's have fun with the marketing speak. How overhype is hype? Because that alone is fun, right? Like, remember this year CES, 12-bit light panel, and then suddenly the whole 12-bit language is gone. They went so overboard with that 12-bit language, you can't find it anywhere anymore. But at CES, I remembered in their promo, this is 12-bit. Turns out, it's just the lighting, the luminance in the back that's 12-bit. And technically, you're not getting 12-bit color. And then suddenly, you don't hear it anymore, right? So marketing went out of control a bit. And so I expect the same from Samsung. I love their marketing team. They're just so over the top. But hey, that's what makes it fun, right? Consumer electronics marketing. You got to love them. All right, Nick, you are late to the conversation. Let's see. I was wondering if I'm better off getting the new TCL 6 series 75-inch 8K R648 for only $3,000 or the X95J. Digital Trends love the TCL 8K. So, Nick, if you've been watching my content for any length of time, you know that I really dislike 8K. The TCL 6 Series 75-inch is phenomenal, not because it's 8K. It's because it's getting all these improvements, and it happens to have 8K. If you took away the 8K and made it 4K, it would look just as good, but even brighter. So forget the 8K for now. The problem is you're paying $3,000 because it's 8K. The Sony X95J, on the other hand, is not 8K. It's only 4K. So you have all the advantages of what Sony brings to the table without the disadvantages of 8K. And so I don't know if the X95J will be better than the 75-inch 8K R648, but the R646, that's the 6 series 4K version of this TV, will be out, and comparing that to the X95J will give you an idea of how it compares a little bit. I mean, it's not a complete transitive property, but it gives me an idea at least of TCL's image processing and to see if it's caught up to Sony's. So, but ultimately though, in a dark room, more dimming zones may be better. But remember, Digital Trends did not put this TV in challenging dark room, bright content where blooming could be an issue. And that's the problem with super bright LED TVs. Blooming oftentimes is an issue, like we saw with the U8G. So let's wait and see. I'm excited too. I think this is, again, a great year for LCD TVs. So you guys all did well to wait, those of you that did. And speaking of blooming, Roberto has a question. Going up my C10, how good is the Q90A with handling blooming black levels and light leakage? Because I've been thinking of getting it due to being disappointed with overall brightness of C10. So the Q90A, it has great blooming control, the best among LCD TVs, great black levels, the best, light leakage, slight, but then you're not going to get the same pop and resolution and contrast as the C10. However, that may not be important to you because the Q90 is so bright. So if you put the Q90A in standard mode, that is where you get the most out of the Samsung, unfortunately. In standard mode, you're going to get that pop, that brightness, that HDR effect. In movie mode or the calibrated day or night mode, you're going to get the best accurate colors, and the blacks will be blacker. However, you're not going to get that same pop. So it's a give and take. And you may not be happy because the C10 blacks and contrast is so good. Go to the Q90A, you get your brightness, but is it worth the trade-off? Let us know because it's so hard to predict. In a dark room, the Q90A is not going to compare. I'm assuming you have a bright room, right? That's why the brightness of the C10 is disappointing. So, all right. Another 5 minutes of question, everyone. Thank you for coming by. Come and ask your questions. Hey, Michael Lobeck. Good comment. The thing is, Hisense and Samsung Q90A and TCL all have problems. Yes, different problems, but they all have problems. They get recommended. And then when you read user reviews, some people say, stay away from this TV because of problems. So let's unpack this. It's not stay away from this TV because of problems. It's stay away from this TV because it did not match my use case. So let's end with that. Every TV has a use case. Let's not call it a problem. Every TV has a specific use case, right? Whether you're in a dark room, a bright room, room with glare, if you match your TV to your use case, then you've solved that problem. But if you buy a TV that's designed for a different use case, and then you're putting it in your use case, and your use case is the very weakness of this TV, well, that's the compromise I had to give up in order to address the other use case, you have a problem. So let's just take the QN90A, right? The QN90A, its use case is, well, let's do it right now. There we go. Look at that amazing color. Look at the deep blacks. Wow, that's so great. That's my use case because you're in a dark room. In a dark room, phenomenal. But you go into a bright room, and then what are you going to get? You go into a bright room suddenly, like, wait a minute, how come this, where's my resolution? And it's not as bright as the U8G. What happened? Oh, okay, let's make it brighter. So you make it brighter. And what? Oh, wait, now the face is all red. And okay, you see the issue here? That's its compromise. But in a dark room, neither of these TVs will do as well as the QN90A. In a bright room, maybe you should be looking at the U8G or the U7G because they can get bright enough. But what if you have glare? If you have glare, neither of these TVs have a good anti-glare coating. More importantly, off angle. Off angle, neither of these TVs look any good at all. So if you buy a U8G, you loving it, and you tell your friend to, and then he puts it off to an angle, it's like, oh my God, what's that blooming? The color's off, all these horrible things. Well, you should have gotten a Samsung QN90A because off angle, it still looks good off angle. These two TVs look completely washed out. So yes, no TV is perfect, but they're all designed to look good in a very specific environment. Know your environment and then choose the TV that fits that environment. And that's why we're here with the Q&A, right? If you tell me your environment, streaming, sports, motion, whatever it is, gaming, and in a bright room and a not so bright room, then we can at least narrow it down to two TVs that do best in that environment because no TV is perfect. All right, guys. Well, we're going to close it out. Great questions, everyone. Thanks for putting up with with me solo. It's so much easier having a guest on, but we try to get you updated. So have a good weekend. And until next time, pass the remote. And if I didn't get to your question, hey, we'll be back. All right. And I will put up a U7G, the review sometime tomorrow. So have a good weekend and pass the remote, everyone.